So welcome to the second panel discussion and on the topic of people-to-people ties. And so I think this topic will be more relevant to all people here, lighter in tone and relevant to our life. So I'm Tong Quek from Dinh News. Although I'm not affiliated with Fulbright University Việt Nam, we share the same mission of Fulbright to promote the mutual understanding and mutual trust between two countries. So the people-to-people ties, as in remarks by Ambassador Napper has said, because it's like to draw the two countries together, to draw the two peoples together, the people of the two countries together. So it's safe to say that during the 27 years, our mutual understanding between two countries has been strengthened further. So with that, I'm delighted to have our panelists here today, and they're all working directly in the field people to people. So I would like to start first with Mr. Chuck Searcy. He has been working in Vietnam since 1995, and specifically in the addressing the war legal scenes in Vietnam. So how do you see the role of veterans like you, and how do you see about the cooperation between the two governments in addressing the war legacy so far?
I think the general question of addressing the war legacies can be answered with compliment to the government of Vietnam for having persevered through great difficulties in the early years of the post-war relationship and creating the conditions that would allow the U.S. and Vietnam to come back together and to become friends and to work together in mutual respect. It took a lot of skill, it took a lot of patience, a lot of perseverance on the part of the Vietnamese people and the Vietnamese government. But it also required, I think, an important element of diplomacy is a second track of diplomacy. At the embassy level and at the bilateral government relationship, of course, there are crucial decisions that must be made. But at the same time, on another track, there are diplomatic initiatives underway that are conducted by veterans, yes, and veterans have played, I think, an important role, but many other people on a citizen level who have supported the diplomatic initiatives of the government, but in a way that operates at the ground level, that involves truly people to people. In my experience, American veterans who survived the war here and returned home, many of us became opponents of the U.S. government and its policy in Vietnam and took to the streets and demonstrated at universities and took actions to protest the war and to encourage the U.S. government to stop the war. We did that at the grassroots level, and we garnered tremendous support from American citizens. And indirectly, that led to the ending of the war in 1975. After that time, as the difficult path to reconciliation seemed to be blocked at step after step, American citizens, and again, American veterans, reached out to Vietnamese people and to other veterans and began to create ties of friendship and mutual respect that led to breakthroughs in the relationship at the bilateral level. I remember many years ago, and I'm not even sure what year it was, the late 1980s, I believe, maybe before 1990. A retired professor now in Hanoi, Professor Nguyen Ngoc Hum, was the first Vietnamese veteran who went to the U.S. and spoke on behalf of Vietnamese veterans and the Vietnamese people, but at an unofficial level. He was invited by CBS News to be on the quite popular CBS News program called 60 Minutes. And he traveled from city to city in the U.S. meeting with local citizens and describing what it was like to be a veteran of the war in Vietnam, but from the Vietnamese side. At one stop at a high school in a small town in the Midwest, the organizer of the event realized that in the audience were American veterans, and they were dressed in their camouflage outfits and their field jackets, and they were carrying signs that said, "Go home, communist," "Not welcome here," "You are the enemy," things like that, very hostile. And the organizer said, "I think we better cancel this event. We shouldn't do this. The audience seems very hostile tonight." And Professor Holmes said, "No," he said, "let's start. Please introduce me and let me say a few words, and let's see what happens." So the organizer introduced him, and Professor Holmes stood up and he said, "I am also a veteran of the war." He said, "Maybe my situation is similar to yours." He said, "When I was at the university, my life was quite good in Hanoi, but after the Tet Offensive 1968, students were recruited for the military to go south." And he said, "I went to the south, and for the next 8 years, I was there in the war." He said, "I came home, and I could not get back into the university. I didn't have any money. My girlfriend had married somebody else." He said, "My life was changed, and it was really quite terrible in those early years." And the veterans in the audience began to take down their signs, and they began to look at each other and say to themselves, "Yes, that was my experience also. It was very difficult when I came back." So immediately he created this bond between the Vietnamese veterans and the American veterans. And at the end of that presentation, they all came down to the stage and they embraced. And those kinds of relationships developed over those early years when veteran-to-veteran outreach discovered that we all were facing problems with Agent Orange. We all were facing problems with adjustment to post-war realities. Easier in many ways for Americans than for the Vietnamese, but difficult also for American soldiers. So out of that relationship and out of that bonding came a parallel track of supporting diplomatic initiatives that would lead to reconciliation between the two countries. And also at times, especially on the American side, situations in which we were very, very critical of the U.S. government, and in which we resisted the U.S. government and demanded that the U.S. government do more, which annoyed the U.S. government a lot. They were very upset with some of the things that we did. But in the end, I think that helped to contribute to the reconciliation that occurred.
So I would like to follow up with your response. So when you mentioned about the resistance from the U.S. government, so addressing the war legacy is a long journey that can take decades. So will the change in the U.S. government every 4 years affect this process or not?
Actually, as I was listening to Ambassador Ving and Professor Quan, and earlier Ambassador Mark Napper from the U.S., I realized that over the years, with each change in administration, from Democrats to Republicans, back to Democrats, from presidents with very different natures and political approaches and administrations, the truth is that the U.S. Vietnam policy has been very, very consistent. And it has always been incrementally moving forward, improving. The relationship has been built on mutual respect. And in my observation from contacts with the U.S. Congress and with administrations in Washington, with the embassy and the consulate here and the American community here, and also our Vietnamese friends, I don't see any possibility of reversing that. It seems to me that we are always going to be moving forward and upward with a strengthened relationship as long as we base that on mutual respect. And I'm very confident about that.
Yeah, so for summary, do you think how can veterans like you can continue to contribute to the bilateral relation?
I think veterans, fortunately for us, we maybe have a larger voice than we deserve, but nonetheless, people usually listen to us, and I think that's the case in Vietnam too. The veterans in Vietnam have earned great respect here. So as long as we stay in close contact with the developments in Vietnam and see that the relationship is on the right track, I think we'll work closely with the U.S. government. If we think that it's on the wrong track, I think we will speak out, and we're not reluctant to do that. Years ago, when I first came to Vietnam, and I became interested in and involved in the issue of Agent Orange, which at that time was a matter of abject denial by the U.S. government. We would take no responsibility for anything related to Agent Orange. We didn't believe that caused birth defects and disabilities and medical problems. We refused to discuss it. And at that time, we veterans, American veterans, would discuss it publicly, and we would do interviews in newspapers and on television. And at one time, a friend of mine at the U.S. Embassy contacted me, and he said, I hope you're happy, because he said, you are now the persona non grata #1 at the embassy. And I said, well, to what do I owe that honor? And he said, because you won't shut up about Agent Orange. You keep getting quoted in the newspaper saying that this is the U.S. responsibility and we must do something, which was true. But I took that as a point of pride. The fact is that I and other veterans, many of us, stated very clearly that this was a matter of justice and fairness, and if we were going to help American veterans and their families suffering from Agent Orange, we should do the same for the Vietnamese. And we didn't waver in that position, and gradually over the years, the U.S. position shifted. And the U.S. now takes responsibility for Agent Orange, has assisted, as the earlier panelists said, in a tremendous cleanup of dioxin contamination sites, and now finally is beginning to divert money and resources to direct assistance to families, Vietnamese families who are suffering from Agent Orange. So it has taken a long time. There's been some tension, but generally the relationship has been constructive in bringing the U.S. and Vietnam to the point of cooperation where we are now.
Yeah, thank you. So I would like to move up with our speaker, Madam Thủy. So I remember that when U.S. Deputy Secretary of State Wendy Sherman visited Fulbright University Vietnam, she emphasized about the young generation play a key role in searching for global efforts. And so my question for you is, the Fulbright University Vietnam has admitted many students for the past 4 years, and the first batch of students will graduate next year. So over the past 4 years, how have you and your colleagues at UV have prepared for the students to face with the dynamic and actually impatient future?
Thank you for the questions. Yeah, I look back, and it has been 6 or 7 years since we started this venture. I think that's something called the Fulbright University Vietnam. And next year, our first batch of the student is going to graduate from the school. That would be a very important moment for the history, for the short history of our university, because like people say, that's the time that the proof of concept is going to be verified and witnessed by the society. Now, how have we been preparing our students for the so-called a very impatient future? One thing that I realized in working with the young people in Vietnam for the last few years is that the best way to prepare our students is mainly to offer them an opportunity or a space so that they can do it themselves. They need very little guidance from others, but they need an environment and a safety zone so that they can explore and decide how are they going to do it. I think just give you a few examples that our students actually, they started going out and work and intern with firms right after their first year. So at the university, at our university, we don't wait until the third year or the fourth year before we send them out to the market. Actually, we send them out right away. And a lot of people caution us, saying that, are you sure that they are ready? Are you sure that they have enough knowledge to work in the market? Are you sure that the future employers are not going to be disappointed by all these students, and that may harm the future of their job opportunities? I think they all surprise us, and I just want to assure you that probably we have been, for a long time, underestimate the younger generation in Vietnam. Now, our students, right after first year, when they were still freshmen, and we sent them to work in companies, startup, NGO, big corporate, a lot of them return after the summer, even with the extended offer or even a full-time offer for them to work. So what I want to do is that I just want to invite all of you, whenever you have time, to come and visit us, talk to our students, look at the way how they interact with themselves and with the guests like you, and that would be probably give you some assurance about the younger people of Vietnam. And again, to prepare them, and I know that a lot of you are parents in the room, to prepare for our students and the younger generation of Vietnam. The best way is probably sometime we just let them go and then explore and try and have faith in them, rather than keep worrying about whether they can do this, whether they can do that. And I think that they will all give us a great surprise.
So when we mention about the people-to-people ties, we used to think about many ways. Not only Vietnam sends students to overseas, but many overseas come to Vietnam to study and finding and exploring Vietnamese culture and history. So the vision of Fulbright University Vietnam is to become a top choice for students in the region in the next 25 years. So how are you on the journey of achieving that vision?
Building an academic institution 5 or 6 years ago, before I got in this job, I thought that it would be similar to building a company, building a corporate. But how much I was wrong. Building an academic institution is very complex and complicated undertaking. But at the same time, I think that the outcome and the result was very rewarding. Now you talk to me about, okay, in 25 years, what university or Fulbright University Vietnam would be like. We have a saying among ourselves. Now, please don't blame me for being, I think, too optimistic or too, what can I say? It is too arrogant in saying that. But then we can all dream, right? We have a saying that 25 in 25. So the top 25 universities in the region or in the world in 25 years. Now, what we are going to do, and when we start, I think we all know that, okay, building an academic institution and making it great, I think that the so-called the knowledge and the skills are abundant around us. We can take in a program from top schools in the US, in the UK, in Singapore, in Hong Kong, bring it here and think that it is going to be great. My personal experience for the last 5 or 6 years, that it was not right, it was wrong. It is so easy just to bring the curriculum and program to Vietnam and think that it is going to work and it is going to make us great. No. I think that each university, in order to become great and to become excellent, there is something else. And I think something that the French have the terminology to say that it's the je ne sais quoi, or I think in English, we have something called the little something that makes a difference. And at Fulbright, we define that little something, the je ne sais quoi, is the Vietnamese DNA of the institution. Because we know that we can bring US curriculum, UK curriculum, Hong Kong curriculum to Vietnam. But then how can you stand on your own and differentiate from the rest? Because only when you are a little bit different that you can show how better or how great you are. So at Fulbright, one thing that we instill in our students from day one is that not only teaching them how to know or how to do, but the most important part is how to be. How can you be a Vietnamese, a great Vietnamese who is competitive not only in the country but in the region, in the context of the world? And what can you bring to the region and to the world? Because if the only thing you can do is that you expect to take from other people, okay, let's enjoy US education, let's enjoy UK economic support. I don't think that we can build a great institution with such attitude. We have to define what we can bring and contribute to the rest of the world. And that's why we choose the DNA of Fulbright right from day one, the Vietnamese roots. It has to be deep, it has to be strong. I think before we become, an international of what we call an institution. And again, I would welcome you to come and then join in some of our class. One of our professors on Vietnam Studies is here. And last week, we received, I think, a delegation from Columbia University, and all of us know that the moment you say Columbia University, the name already gave it a lot of weight. But then when they sat down and talked to our students, they were completely blown away. And here, I'm not trying to talk about, I think it is diplomatic exchange between two parties, right? They were completely blown away, not because of our student ability to speak English, the ability to say things, but then just the way how they think and how they position a certain issue in a context of Vietnam and the world. And I think that the first panel already showed that if Vietnam want to be competitive and want to have a place in this world, we have to have our own strong national interest, but how to work with the rest. And that is the way how we prepare our students. And hopefully that next year when they graduate, the first batch, we can show you, hopefully with the fanfare, about, I think, the products of, no, I hate to use the word products. It is the outcome of our venture.
Yeah, thank you. And because I also noticed a very interesting development at Fulbright, because Fulbright University Việt Nam is the first non-profit and that embraced the American liberal arts approach in higher education. So I see that at Fulbright University Việt Nam is fostering pay it forward culture and philanthropy in education. And so earlier this year, a philanthropist and the families commit to $40 million to Fulbright, making it the largest gift to an educational institution in Vietnam. So while charity is still widely practiced in Vietnam, philanthropy, and particularly in higher education, is still limited. So what are your opinion on this, and how can philanthropists can partner with higher education towards creating a sustainable and systemic change?
So I have to say that the Vietnamese are very generous people. If you look at the support that the public gave to several events on misfortune of our country, flood or natural disasters, you saw the generosity shown very clearly. But in Vietnam, I think that charity is strong, but I think philanthropy was still a very, very new concept. And I think that the reason for that, probably there are historical reason, cultural reason, and also I think that the evolution of faith in the society. So we, in Vietnam, we basically say that lá lành đùm lá rách, right? So we want to help people who are not as fortunate as we are. But at the same time, we talk about một miếng khi đói bằng một gói khi no. So we help when we know that other people are, I think, in desperate moments. So charity, that's charity. Charity is to alleviate the immediate misfortune. But philanthropy, I always think that philanthropy probably also fit really well with the Vietnamese mentality, because philanthropy is getting closer to the entrepreneurship mindset of the Vietnamese. So philanthropy is to give, but at the same time, with some expectation of the performance of the people you give the money to. So people give money to education, or they donate the money, but they expect that, okay, you have to prepare the students to achieve this. You have to build this class up to this standard, and I'm going to come and check on you in doing that. And I think that that type of so-called the giving giving culture in Vietnam in the future, I think that if explained it well, I strongly believe that the Vietnamese are going to buy into such concept very soon. And I have to say that even though we announced the 40 million gift from our 8 donors, generous donors, but there are many other donors who basically decline or refuse a chance for the names to be announced that already gave to Fulbright. And the total amount is much higher than the 40 million that we talk on the press. So again, I think that together with Fulbright, with the concept of the not-for-profit university, we also expect that we also open the way for another form of giving, not only charity, but philanthropy to prosper in Vietnam. And I believe that the society is going to get to walk along with us if we can explain clearly that what it means and the kind of responsibility that the people who receive it is going to perform or to fulfill. And maybe in 3 or 4 years' time, we can come back and see that, okay, how much we can increase the gift from 40 or 50 or 60 million now to another level. Thank you, Tuan.
So I want to move forward with our last speaker, Mr. Đỗ Đức Tưởng. He is the clean energy advisor at USAID Việt Nam missions. So because the renewable energy is one of the most attention field now in the cooperation between the two countries, And it's also one of the few that the Biden administration had committed to finance during the US-ASEAN Special Summit in May. So could you please tell us about some several projects that funded by USAID to help Vietnam to promote the use of clean energy in Vietnam?
Thank you, Mr. Toàn, hi everybody. Maybe before I answer the question from the moderator, I want to give a very brief introduction about USAID, which I believe many of you here already know, but some of you may not know what we do here in Vietnam. So we are part of the US government. We use the US government funding to support the Vietnamese people and Vietnamese government in different areas, including the Agent Orange remediation in Da Nang and in Bien Hoa. We also provide support in health, education, particularly for the Fulbright University. But on the other hand, we also provide support in helping the government of Vietnam to mitigate the impact of climate change. And within that, we also have some programs focusing on energy. And in terms of energy partnership between the US and Vietnam, just a few days ago in Washington, D.C., the delegation from Vietnam, led by the Ministry of Industry and Trade Vice Minister Đặng Hoàng An, together with our leadership in the U.S., had organized what they call U.S.-Vietnam Energy Security Dialogue, which set out the priorities between the countries, how to move forward to increase the energy securities for both countries, but also to increase the trade and the partnership in that area. For USAID in Vietnam, we have been working with the government, particularly the Ministry of Industry and Trade, for almost 10 years now, where we provide support to the government here to design and implement different kind of policies, strategies, and plans where they can really increase the deployment of renewable and clean energy sources and try to reduce the amount of coal and fossil fuel uses. On the other side, we also work with private sector partners where we provide advisory service and technical assistance support to help them build their solar or wind projects here to implement different kind of energy efficiency solutions in the factories and in the buildings. So right now in Vietnam, we are working on two big programs. The first one called Vietnam Urban Energy Security, where we work directly with Da Nang and Ho Chi Minh City governments to really have to deploy more and more innovative energy solutions for the city context, in the urban context, that have the city to be more independent, in terms of energy, but also to have them reduce as much GHG emission as possible. The other project we are working on called Vietnam Low Emission Energy Program in the partnership with the Ministry of Industry and Trade, where we help them to work on the Power Master Planning, the PTP8, if some of you may know, that set out the vision for the country to know, okay, how much power we will need from now to 2050 or 2045, right? And within that, how much solar, how much wind, how much coal, how much gas, and how much hydro we will need to ensure the country will, have enough power to provide to the economic growth, but also in order to reduce as much as possible the GHG emission. On the other side, we also aim to mobilize about $2 billion US in terms of investment into different renewable energy projects. And talking about renewable energy projects, I would like to emphasize its importance role in terms of, firstly, reducing emission, secondly, to replace the expensive fossil fuel sources, but the third role will be also to ensure the energy security for not just for Vietnam but also for other countries. So that's the reason why we emphasize the importance of renewable energy deployment here in Vietnam within our programs.
Yeah, so Vietnam is considered to have a lot of potential in developing renewable energy, especially like in wind power and solar energy. So, but this sector is still in early stage. So, what are the barriers, and how can the USAID Vietnam have to address these challenges?
You're right. In Vietnam, if you look at our map, right, we will see that we have very long coastal line, which poses to a very good position in terms of harnessing the renewable energy resources, not just solar, but also wind energy. For wind, I talk about the onshore wind on the land and the offshore wind, which are in the ocean. And those have been, for example, taking wind energy. The World Bank here estimated that the onshore wind, we have about roughly 400,000 megawatt potential technically of wind power to be harnessed, and for offshore we have about 500 gigawatt of 500,000 megawatt of wind power that we can deploy. But of course it needs a lot of investment and other technical and policy regulation and incentive mechanism in place to help deploy such huge potential resources. And like Mr. Toàn said, that Vietnam is in very early stage of developing a renewable energy sector. Over the last 3 years, we have been bringing about 20,000 megawatt of wind and solar into the operation, helping to contribute to the development of the energy sector here. But that is still a very early stage, given that only 4 gigawatt of wind has been deployed compared to the hundreds of gigawatt potential that we have. Right now we still have, I think, more than 30% of the power produced by coal, and other 30% of the power in the country produced from gas. Those will run out quickly, and their prices will increase certainly, and there's also the need to achieve the net zero emission goal by 2050 as we committed in the COP26. And for that, the need to increase as quick as possible renewable energy sources is more and more critical for Vietnam. For that, USAID has been working on the government here on 3 things. One is the mobilizing the much needed investment through, for example, we have the Development Finance Corporation, DFC, from the US, which are seeking to provide investment loan and credit, and also guarantee for Vietnamese banks and local developers here to build renewable energy projects. Through our support, USAID also work with EVN and its load dispatching center to help them improve their capacity in order to dispatch, the way they can. So the way the grid operator here do is that power plant here and there, they need to ensure that each of them will complement to each other, and where we need the power, and then they will try to direct the source of power from here and there to ensure that the whole country is insufficient of energy. So the more and more renewable coming into the grid will require a lot of attention and technical expertise in order to ensure that to minimize the intermittency, the changes of, you have the cloud coming, then the whole solar plant will be coming to zero capacity. So that kind of changes need to be adopted with some high-end technical, not just the procedure but also the equipment. So for that angle, USAID has been working with the National Lab for Renewable Energy in the U.S. to work with Vietnam, to work with EVN and MOIT in order to increase the ability to integrate more renewable into the system. The third part of that is that we, on the strategic part of that, we work with Vietnam to introduce different mechanisms so that we can deploy and then mobilize more private sector investment. For example, we are now working with MOIT now on what we call direct power purchase agreement. That mechanism will enable big energy consumers like the large factories here in Vietnam to sign contract directly with a solar farm or a wind farm, to ensure that the factories are powered 100% from renewable resources. And that mechanism, we expect to have a pilot phase very soon by end of this year. And then from that, we will extend it into upscale stage where we can open up the market and then to actually open up the renewable energy market here for companies to work on.